Noah's heart thundered so loudly he swore the walls of the sauna could hear it. The steam curled around him, thick and heavy, but it was the stranger's gaze across the cedar bench that pinned him in place. In that fleeting second, under the haze of heat and the pulse of his own fear, Noah felt his carefully built world teeter on the edge of collapse. It was a Tuesday evening at Apex Fitness, a high-end gym tucked in the heart of Seattle's Capitol Hill. Noah, 25, a graphic designer with a knack for blending into the background, had been coming here for months. The gym was his sanctuary, a place where sweat and routine drowned out the noise of his thoughts he'd spent years burying. He wasn't out. Not to his family, not to his coworkers, not even to himself most days. Growing up in a small Montana town, he'd learned early that some truths were better locked away. But in the sauna, where the world softened into steam and shadows, those truths had a way of clawing their way out. The stranger, Ethan, as Noah would later learn, had walked in 10 minutes ago, his presence like a spark in a dry forest. Ethan was everything Noah wasn't: confident, unapologetic, with a smile that could disarm a room. His blonde hair fell in effortless waves, and his green eyes held a quiet intensity that made Noah's skin prickle. He wore a white towel slung low on his hips, his broad shoulders and sculpted arms catching the dim light. Noah tried not to stare, but his eyes betrayed him, lingering on the curve of Ethan's collarbone, the way his chest rose with each steady breath. "You come here often?" Ethan's voice broke through the hum of the sauna's heater, low and warm, like he was sharing a secret. Noah startled, his towel slipping slightly as he shifted. Yeah." Most evenings, he cleared his throat, hating how his voice cracked. "You?" "First time," Ethan said, leaning back, his arms resting casually on the bench. "Just moved to the city. Thought I'd check out the hype." His gaze flickered over Noah, not predatory, but curious, like he was trying to read a book in a language he hadn't learned yet. Noah nodded, his fingers tightening around the edge of his towel. He wasn't used to this, someone noticing him, someone seeing him. Most days, he moved through life like a ghost, keeping his head down, his desires quieter. But Ethan's presence was a disruption, a crack in the armor Noah had worn for so long it felt like skin. The silence stretched, heavy with possibility. Noah's mind raced. Say something. Anything, but the words caught in his throat, tangled with the fear of what they might reveal. Instead, he focused on the heat, the way it pressed against his chest, making every breath deliberate. He told himself to leave, to escape before the moment tipped into something he couldn't control. Then Ethan leaned forward, his elbow brushing Noah's knee. It was an accident, or maybe it wasn't. Noah froze, his pulse spiking as Ethan's hand lingered, just for a second, before pulling back. "Sorry," Ethan said, but his smile said he wasn't sorry at all. "It's fine," Noah mumbled, his face burning, not from the sauna, but from the sudden awareness of how close they were. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. He wanted to run. He wanted to stay. He wanted to know what Ethan's hand would feel like if it didn't pull away. "You okay?" Ethan asked, his voice softened now, searching. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Noah laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Just hot in here." Ethan's eyes held his, steady and unflinching. "Yeah," he said, his voice dropping. It's definitely getting hotter. Noah's breath hitched. He wasn't imagining it, the pull, the unspoken question hanging between them. For the first time in years, he felt exposed, like every secret he'd buried was rising to the surface, burning through the steam. He didn't know Ethan, didn't know his story, but in that moment, he wanted to. God, he wanted to. The sauna door creaked open, shattering the moment. A middle-aged man shuffled in, oblivious to the tension, and Noah seized the chance to escape. "I should go," he said, standing too quickly, his towel nearly slipping. He didn't look back as he grabbed his gym bag and hurried out, but he felt Ethan's gaze on him, heavy as a touch. Outside, the cool air hit him like a slap. He leaned against the locker room wall, heart still racing, cursing himself. What the hell was that? He'd spent years building walls, keeping people at arm's length, and in 10 minutes, a stranger had made them feel like paper. Noah didn't know if he was terrified or alive for the first time in years. Maybe both. He showered quickly, avoiding the sauna's pull, and left the gym in a daze. The Seattle night was crisp, the city buzzing with life, couples holding hands, neon signs flickering, the hum of possibility. Noah walked home to his small apartment in Fremont, replaying every second of that encounter. Ethan's smile, his voice, the way his hand had brushed Noah's skin, accidental but deliberate, like a question Noah wasn't ready to answer. By the time he collapsed onto his couch, he was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. His phone sat on the coffee table, taunting him. He didn't have Ethan's number, didn't even know his last name, but the memory of him was a spark that refused to die. Noah closed his eyes, trying to push it away, but all he could see was Ethan's face. All he could feel was the heat of that moment, threatening to unravel everything he'd worked so hard to keep hidden. The next evening, Noah stood outside Apex Fitness, gym bag slung over his shoulder, hesitating. He'd spent the day distracted. His designs for a client's branding project a mess of half-finished lines and misplaced colors. Ethan's face kept creeping into his thoughts, uninvited but persistent. Noah told himself he was just here for his routine treadmill, weights, maybe a quick sauna. But deep down, he knew he was hoping to see him again. Inside, the gym was alive with the usual hum, the clank of weights, the thump of music, the chatter of regulars. Noah scanned the room, his heart sinking when he didn't spot Ethan's blonde hair or easy confidence. Good, he thought, trying to convince himself. Less complicated this way. He threw himself into his workout, pushing harder than usual, as if he could sweat out the memory of last night. But the sauna called to him. After an hour, he gave in, wrapping a towel around his waist and stepping into the familiar haze. It was empty, the cedar benches gleaming under the soft light. Noah sat, letting the heat sink into his bones, trying to quiet the questions swirling in his head. What am I doing? Why does it matter so much? The door opened, and Noah's breath caught. Ethan stepped in, towel low on his hips, his smile as disarming as ever. "Fancy seeing you again," he said, settling onto the bench across from Noah, close enough that their knees nearly touched. Noah managed a weak smile. "Yeah, small world." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze steady. "You left in a hurry last night. Everything okay?" Noah's mouth went dry. He wanted to lie, to say it was just the heat. But Ethan's eyes were too sharp, too knowing. Just needed some air, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, like he understood more than Noah was saying. Fair enough. This place can be intense. He paused, then added, I'm Ethan. By the way, figure I should introduce myself before I scare you off again. Noah, he replied, his name feeling like a confession. And you didn't scare me off. Good to know. Ethan's smile widened, and Noah felt that spark again, dangerous and alive. They talked. The conversation light at first. Ethan's move from San Francisco, his job as a freelance photographer, the way Seattle's rain made him miss the sun. But there was an undercurrent, a pull that made every word feel like a step towards something bigger. You ever feel like you're running from something? Ethan asked suddenly, his tone shifting, more serious now. Like you're so busy keeping up appearances you forget who you are? Noah's chest tightened. He wanted to deflect, to change the subject, but Ethan's question cut too close. Sometimes, he admitted, his voice low. It's easier to keep things simple. Ethan tilted his head, studying him. Simple's overrated. Messy's where the good stuff happens. Noah laughed despite himself, the sound easing the knot in his chest. You sound like you've got it all figured out. Far from it, Ethan said, his eyes softening. But I'm trying. Took me a while to stop hiding. Grew up in a place where being myself wasn't exactly encouraged. Moved to San Francisco to find people who got it. Found myself instead. Noah envied the ease in Ethan's voice, the way he owned his story. Noah's own story was a tangle of half-truths and silence, shaped by a childhood where different was a dirty word. He'd left Montana for Seattle to escape, but the weight of those years followed him, heavy as ever. Their conversation was interrupted by the sauna door opening again, another gym-goer stepping in. Noah felt a pang of disappointment, but Ethan stood, brushing his hand against Noah's shoulder as he passed. See you around. Noah, he said, his voice a promise. Noah stayed in the sauna a few minutes longer, his skin buzzing where Ethan's hand had been. He felt like he was standing at a crossroads, one path safe and familiar, the other uncharted and terrifying. He didn't know if he was ready to take that step, but for the first time, he wanted to try. Over the next week, Noah and Ethan fell into a rhythm. They'd meet in the sauna after their workouts, talking about everything and nothing, movies, music, the way Seattle's coffee shops were better than San Francisco's. Ethan's openness was a balm, loosening the grip of Noah's fear. But every brush of their hands, every lingering glance, was a reminder of what Noah wasn't ready to face. One night, as they sat closer than usual, Ethan's voice dropped low. You ever think about what you want? Noah, not what you're supposed to want, but what you want. Noah's throat closed. He wanted to say it, to let the truth spill out, but the words stayed locked inside. Instead, he stood, muttering an excuse about work, and left the sauna, his heart pounding with what he couldn't say. Noah couldn't shake Ethan's question. It followed him through the next few days, a quiet hum beneath his routine. At work, he stared at his computer, his designs blurring as he replayed their conversations. At home, he lay awake, wondering what it would feel like to stop running. Ethan was like a mirror, reflecting the parts of Noah he'd spent years ignoring. It was exhilarating, It was terrifying. Friday night, Noah found himself back at the gym, his nerves a live wire. He hadn't seen Ethan since he'd bolted from the sauna, and part of him hoped Ethan wouldn't show. But when he stepped into the sauna after his workout, there he was, leaning back against the wall, his towel draped casually, his eyes lighting up when he saw Noah. "Thought you might have ditched me for good," Ethan said, his tone teasing but his gaze searching. Noah sat, keeping a careful distance. "Just busy," he lied, hating how weak it sounded. Ethan didn't push, but he didn't let the silence linger either. "You ever been to the Fremont Troll?" he asked, steering the conversation to safer ground. "I went yesterday." "Creepiest thing I've ever seen under a bridge." Noah laughed, grateful for the distraction. They talked about Seattle's quirks, Ethan's photography, Noah's love for sketching. But the ease of their earlier conversations was gone, replaced by a tension Noah couldn't ignore. Ethan's presence was a pull, a gravity Noah wasn't sure he could resist. As the sauna emptied, Ethan shifted closer, his knee brushing Noah's. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. Noah nodded, but his hands were trembling. He wanted to tell Ethan everything about the fear that kept him up at night, the family he hadn't spoken to in years, the part of himself he'd buried so deep it felt like a stranger. But the words wouldn't come. Ethan's hand moved, resting lightly on Noah's. It wasn't a question this time, but a gesture, gentle and deliberate. Noah's breath caught, his body frozen between fight and flight. Ethan didn't pull away, his thumb brushing softly against Noah's knuckles. A quiet reassurance. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Whenever you're ready." Noah's eyes stung, the heat of the sauna blurring with the weight of Ethan's words. He wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this, whatever it was, could be real. But fear was a heavy anchor, and Noah wasn't sure he could break free. He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. "I need to go," he said, his voice cracking. He didn't wait for Ethan's response, grabbing his towel and fleeing to the locker room. His heart pounded as he changed, the cool air doing little to calm the storm inside him. Outside, the Seattle rain had started, a soft drizzle that matched Noah's mood. He walked home, the city lights reflecting in puddles, his thoughts a tangled mess. Ethan's touch lingered, a warmth that refused to fade. Noah wanted to run back, to say the things he couldn't, but fear held him back. It always had. The next few days were a blur. Noah avoided the gym, throwing himself into work, sketching late into the night to keep his mind off Ethan. But every line he drew carried Ethan's face, his smile, his eyes, the way he made Noah feel seen. On Sunday, Noah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Ethan. Got your number from the gym's group chat. Hope that's okay. Want to grab coffee?" Noah stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. He wanted to say yes, wanted to take that leap, but the weight of his past, his family's disapproval, the years of hiding felt like chains. He typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another, then deleted that too. Finally, he set the phone down, his heart heavy with indecision. Noah didn't reply to Ethan's text. Not that day, or the next. But he couldn't stop thinking about it, or about the way Ethan's hand had felt on his, steady and warm. By Wednesday, the silence felt like a betrayal, not of Ethan, but of himself. He was tired of running, tired of hiding. So, against every instinct screaming at him to stay safe, Noah typed a response, "Coffee sounds good." Tomorrow, they met at a small cafe in Capitol Hill, the kind with mismatched chairs and walls covered in local art. Ethan was already there, sitting by the window, his camera on the table, his smile as bright as the morning sun. Noah's nerves settled slightly at the sight of him, but the weight of what he wanted to say pressed against his chest. "You showed," Ethan said, his tone light, but his eyes warm with relief. "Didn't want to ghost you forever," Noah replied, managing a small smile as he sat. They ordered coffee, black for Ethan, a latte for Noah, and fell into easy conversation. Ethan talked about a photo shoot he'd done at Pike Place Market, capturing the chaos of fish throwing and street musicians. Noah shared stories about his latest design project, a logo for a local bookstore. But beneath the small talk, there was a current, a question neither of them voiced. Finally, Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "Noah, I like you. I don't know what you're carrying, but I see it. And I'm here, if you want me to be." Noah's breath caught. He wanted to tell Ethan everything, to let the walls come down, but the words felt too big, too raw. Instead, he said, "I like you too. I don't know how to do this." Ethan's hand found his under the table, a quiet anchor. "You don't have to know. Just let me in." A little at a time, Noah nodded, his throat tight. For the first time, he felt like he could breathe, like the weight of his secrets wasn't crushing him. They stayed at the cafe for hours, talking until the baristas started wiping down tables. When they parted, Ethan's hand lingered on Noah's arm, a promise of more to come. The next few weeks were a blur of moments, coffee dates, late-night walks, stolen glances in the sauna. Noah felt himself opening, slowly, like a flower after a long winter. Ethan was patient, never pushing, but his presence was a constant reminder that Noah didn't have to hide anymore. They kissed for the first time under a streetlight in Fremont, the rain falling softly around them, and Noah felt like he was waking up from a long sleep. But the past wasn't so easy to shake. Noah's family, back in Montana, didn't know about Ethan, didn't know about the part of Noah he'd kept hidden. He hadn't spoken to them in months, but their voices, his father's disapproval, his mother's silence, echoed in his head. Every time he thought about telling them, his stomach twisted with fear. One night, as he and Ethan lay on Noah's couch, tangled together after a movie, Ethan asked, "You ever think about telling your family about us?" Noah tensed, his fingers pausing in Ethan's hair. "I want to," he said quietly. "But it's complicated." Ethan nodded, his hand tracing circles on Noah's back. "I get it. My family wasn't thrilled when I came out. Took years to rebuild that bridge. But you don't have to do it alone." Noah wanted to believe him, wanted to believe he could face his family without losing them. But the fear was still there, sharp and heavy. He buried his face in Ethan's shoulder, letting the warmth of his embrace push the fear away, if only for a moment. Noah's life began to shift in ways he hadn't expected. With Ethan, he felt alive, seen, loved in a way he'd never thought possible. They spent weekends exploring Seattle, hiking in Discovery Park, browsing record stores, sharing quiet moments in the sauna where it all began. But the closer they grew, the more Noah's past loomed, a shadow he couldn't outrun. One evening, as they sat in Ethan's apartment, a cozy loft filled with photography prints and mismatched furniture, Noah's phone buzzed. It was a text from his sister, Claire, the only family member he still talked to regularly. "Mom's asking about you. When are you coming home?" Noah stared at the message, his heart sinking. Home. The word felt like a trap, conjuring images of his father's stern face, his mother's quiet disappointment. He hadn't been back to Montana in 2 years, hadn't told them about Ethan, hadn't told them who he really was. Ethan noticed the change in Noah's expression. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting down his camera. Noah hesitated, then showed him the text. "My sister. She's persistent." Ethan's eyes softened. "You don't talk about your family much. There's not much to say," Noah said, his voice tight. "They're not like me. They don't get it." Ethan reached for his hand, his touch grounding. "They might surprise you. Or they might not. But you can't keep carrying this alone." Noah knew he was right. But the thought of facing his family, of saying the words out loud, felt like stepping off a cliff. He changed the subject, pulling Ethan into a kiss, letting the warmth of the moment drown out the fear. But the fear returned, sharper than ever, when Claire called a week later. "Noah, Mom's sick," she said, her voice trembling. "It's her heart. They're not sure how bad yet, but you need to come home." Noah's world tilted. He booked a flight to Montana that night, his hands shaking as he packed. Ethan offered to come, but Noah shook his head. "I need to do this alone," he said, though the words felt like a lie. The flight to Bozeman was a blur, the Montana landscape stretching endlessly below, a reminder of the life he'd left behind. When he arrived at the hospital, Claire was waiting, her eyes red from crying. She hugged him tightly, and for a moment, Noah felt like a kid again, safe in his sister's arms. His mother was stable but weak, her face pale against the hospital sheets. His father was there too, his expression unreadable. They talked about small things, weather, work, the hospital food, avoiding the elephant in the room. Noah wanted to tell them about Ethan, about the life he was building, but the words stayed locked inside. That night, in his childhood bedroom, Noah called Ethan. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I want to tell them, but what if they hate me?" Ethan's voice was steady, a lifeline across the miles. "They might not understand right away, but you're their son, and you're enough. Noah. You always have been." Noah clung to those words, letting them anchor him through the sleepless night. The next day, he sat with his mother, holding her hand as she slept. When she woke, her eyes found his, and she smiled weakly. "You look happy," she said, her voice soft. "What's changed?" Noah's heart pounded. He could lie, could keep the walls up, but Ethan's words echoed in his mind. "You're enough." He took a breath, and for the first time, he told the truth. "I met someone," he said. "His name's Ethan." The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Noah's mother blinked, her expression unreadable, and for a moment, Noah thought he'd made a mistake. But then she squeezed his hand, her grip weak but steady. "Tell me about him," she said softly. Noah's throat tightened, but he told her about Ethan's laugh, his photography, the way he made Noah feel like he could be himself. His mother listened, her eyes searching his face. And when he finished, she nodded. "He sounds like he makes you happy," she said. "That's what matters. It wasn't perfect." His father, when told later that day, was silent, his jaw tight. Claire hugged Noah, whispering, "I'm proud of you." It was a start, a crack in the wall Noah had built between himself and his family. He didn't know if they'd ever fully understand, but for the first time, he felt like he could breathe. When Noah returned to Seattle, Ethan was waiting at the airport, his smile brighter than the city lights. They didn't speak, just held each other, the weight of the past week melting away in the warmth of their embrace. Back at the gym, they found themselves in the sauna again, the place where it all began. The steam curled around them, and Ethan reached for Noah's hand, his touch a promise. "You did it," Ethan said, his voice full of pride. "You faced it," Noah nodded, his eyes stinging. "I couldn't have done it without you." They sat in silence, the heat wrapping around them like a cocoon. Noah thought about the boy he'd been, the one who'd hidden himself away, and the man he was becoming, one who was learning to love, to trust, to live without fear. The sauna, once a place to escape, had become a place of beginnings. Years later, Noah would look back on that moment, Ethan's hand in his, the steam rising, the world outside fading away, and know it was when everything changed. He'd found love, not just in Ethan, but in himself. And in that small, steamy room, he'd learned that the things he'd hidden, the things he'd feared, were the very things that made him whole.